So welcome to Behind the Resource Card. This is a speaker series that is meant to humanize and normalize these hotlines that appear on our resource cards here at Hope for the Day. So if you haven't seen those before, that's these. And we have these wonderful resource cards for all of our different areas of specialty and conversations. And often when we hand these out at community spaces and music venues, people take them, but they don't really know what they're going to get. And it can be really uncomfortable and uncertain to what type of experience they may have when they're calling for help or when they're calling for help for a loved one. So I want to validate that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Bassett. I work out of Hines VA Hospital, which is a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, on our suicide prevention team, and we work closely with the Veterans Crisis Line.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anita Carmona Caravelli, and like Kristy, I work at the Hines VA just outside of Chicago, and I am the lead suicide prevention coordinator at the facility. And as Kristy said, we have a close relationship with the National Veterans Crisis Line as we are routed calls to veterans in our catchment area, which I'm sure we'll talk more about later.
Okay, so the Veterans Crisis Line has been around since 2007. Well, and Anita, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. But just seeing a need for veterans to have their own resource line. Veterans have unique needs, unique experiences that it's found to be beneficial to have folks that are competent and those different needs.
So for the Veterans Crisis Line, we actually are a part of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and it was that partnership was created when the VA created our National Suicide Prevention Program in response to the fact that more veterans were dying by their own hands than in combat. And so that's where the Press One feature was born. And there, prior to COVID, I feel like that's a qualifier for every conversation these days, but pre-COVID, we had 3 call centers. So Canandaigua, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, and Topeka, Kansas. Now that we are, in the midst of COVID, hopefully creeping closer to more normalcy, the 1,000 responders are actually remote, and there's a few in person, but that's likely to continue even post-pandemic. So a lot of the crisis line responders are veterans themselves. So like a lot of, I think most everyone has talked about, that importance of peer support and, understanding where the person's coming from. All of them are, have at least bachelor's level training, and, many have advanced training beyond that. One of the really nice components, just like everyone has talked about, that they get calls from just as basic as, hey, I just got discharged from the military and I need help connecting with my local VA facility, all the way up to, I have a firearm to my head and I'm scared that I'm going to use it on myself. And literally everything you can think of in between, they get calls on. So, and also like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, there's the 1-800 number, just press 1 for active duty veterans, active duty military, sorry, and veterans. There's the veteranscrisisline.net, which also houses the chat feature and lots of other good resources, and then a text feature as well. So three-pronged approach usually works best. And a nice part about it is because like I said, there were the 3 call centers, and then but about 1,000 responders, taking calls every day, and there's approximately 150 VA medical centers. So when those veterans call and they need assistance with their local facility, because the line 2 is confidential, we at the VA share a system with the Veterans Crisis Line. So they are actually able to place consults to us live, or in real time, and that way we can follow up at the local level. Most of the calls are handled by the crisis line, by that responder. And they call and they get the help that they receive, and that's it. And us as well, I think it's around the same percentage, about 5% where emergency services are sent. And again, that's if someone is at imminent risk or they request the assistance.
Yeah, so like the police thing is huge. I feel like we talk about that a lot, especially with veterans, because veterans just tend to own firearms at probably much higher rate than non-veterans because they were trained on how to use them. They have them as hobbies. So the fear of like that loss of their identity really drives them to not want to ask for help. So that's a huge piece of what we talk about. I think a lot of folks with a veteran tend to think, well, if I'm not eligible for health care, then I can't call a crisis line, but they can. It doesn't matter whether or not they're eligible for VA health care benefits. Anybody can call the crisis line. It is anonymous unless they choose to share their information, which I think is another misconception, that they think crisis line means that person will access their medical records, which they can do, but they don't do that without someone's permission. And that like family members can call and remain anonymous, friends can call and remain anonymous, and that, should a veteran who calls, or, a family member, friend call, and they do want a consult placed after, like the help doesn't just stop at the end of that call. Once they get connected to our local suicide prevention teams, they can offer them, a whole bevy of resources, like whether or not it's that they want to stay within the VA system, they can, if they do, we'll help them get connected within the VA. If they would prefer to seek community resources, we will help them find something locally that's within their community. My understanding with the Veterans Crisis Line, and so like obviously full disclosure in that I don't work at the actual crisis line, I'm working at a facility, but my understanding is that all the respondents have at least a bachelor's degree. Like Anita was saying, many of them are like advanced level clinicians, so MSW, psychologists, things like that. And they, as federal employees, we go through pretty extensive, I'm sorry, I have a 1.5-year-old screaming behind in the door, so if you can hear him, I apologize. He's having a lot of fun. But there's extensive training, cultural competency trainings that we're expected to do, and a lot of those are done yearly. So having to do that every yearly cycle with different trainings thrown in throughout the year. I'll say, federal government does try to be responsive to current events. So we often will get a training, on things that are in response to current events that are going on. If if folks have a bad experience, they can call the White House VA hotline. That's a really great tool. You know, I do encourage folks to use it sometimes when they feel like they're not getting any kind of response or care taken at our local facility levels. Veterans can contact what we call a patient advocate program. But once you call the White House VA line, it's kind of like you're getting the big dogs involved, and so there is expected service recovery to happen within the agency. The agency has to report back to this report line to tell them how everything was fixed. So I always tell vets to advocate for themselves that when they've had a bad experience in that way.
At the Veterans Crisis Line, that would be through usajobs.gov. They are employees, like federal employees. So unfortunately, we don't have volunteer opportunities, at the local level or the national level. But like I said, if people are interested in, federal employment, it's usajobs.gov.
But I will say there's a great resource page on veteranscrisisline.net. So definitely, like, if people want to show advocacy, try to destigmatize this, we encourage them to utilize those resources, printouts. Like, I keep a lawn sign with a crisis line in front of my house. So so I think, like Bree was saying, I've been in the social services world for like 6-7 years. I couldn't agree more. I think that, like, housing, access to healthcare, food, all those are suicide prevention. Before I moved over to this program about a year ago, I was working in our homeless program. And just knowing that, veterans experience rates of suicide higher than their non-veteran counterparts, and that our homeless veterans experience rates of suicide almost 10 times as high as their veteran counterparts, right? Like, I was working with such a high-risk population that I just felt called to this work. And I think that, like, there's such an impact by just being there for someone and being kind and getting to, not just work with veterans in terms of getting them access to care in the midst of a crisis, but also working with the community and external stakeholders, just to make them feel empowered to have these conversations and to intervene. Because I always tell people, like, how often have you been having a bad day? You feel like on the verge of crying, and that one person notices and asks you what's wrong, and it's like that's your permission to let the floodgates open and feel better after that conversation.
Yeah, so I have been with the VA in a few months, will be 12 years, and specifically working in suicide prevention for about 9.5 years. And, I think a lot of times the universe puts you where you're supposed to be. And, I've been passionate about this work for a long time. And I feel, just like others were saying, that it's such a problem. Yet the stigma just causes, us to not make strides that we know we can, because this is preventable, right? And my guys are older than Kristy's, but just having 2 small children, and knowing, the statistic that in the United States, if you're in between the ages of, 10 to 34, my mind's going blank, sorry. Suicide's the second leading cause of death. I mean, to me, that is Kristy knows me. I'm very rarely at a loss for words, but that statistic is just so troubling to me and so upsetting. And yeah, so there's a lot more work to be done. So I'm glad that we have all of these resources, and that I also like that, for example, the Veterans Crisis Line uses no wrong door approach. So, it doesn't matter if a veteran calls because they ran out of their prescriptions, or, they need to, cancel a CT scan. It doesn't matter what their issue is. They can call the crisis line and they will get the help that they need. And I think it's, the same. And like we've been talking about, resources, so the more that people understand that, it's okay to get help, and it's okay to, feel really bad sometimes. And also that to know that there's other resources, like Kristy referenced earlier, the resource tab on the veteranscrisisline.net. And because that's what I say very blatantly, like, we just want you to get help. I mean, yes, I work for the VA. I work at a particular VA that has, a very strong mental health system. But we also say, quite frankly, and this is my verbiage, I'm not representing the VA here, but I don't give a shit where you get care. I just want you can hate the VA, you can hate me just because I work for the VA. That's fine. But we just want you to get help. So, Kristy, over this last year, and yes, it's been a year now, Kristy, that she's been, on our team and in her position, that, she's met so many, community partners and, working with law enforcement, that once again, just spreading that awareness that, hey, help is available, and we want people to get help, and it doesn't matter where. So. So at the VA, just echoing what, at the Veterans Crisis Line, and echoing what people have said, is that you don't, just to reiterate to that, family, friend, other human being in that person's life, that, you don't have to, have an advanced degree. You don't have to be a suicide prevention coordinator, or, a director of, crisis line center. You can just literally be someone who shows genuine care and concern for that other human being. And specifically in terms of veterans being at, increased risk of suicide, VA does offer a really nice training for anyone, for lay people. It's VA Save. And so, signs of suicidal thinking, asking the important questions, validating the veteran's experience, and then encouraging and expediting treatment. So, just knowing that help is available, and, whether it's the local VA, whether it's a vet center, whether it's a local, hospital, that help is available. And also to know, it not only is it okay to not be okay, but it's 2021. It's almost 2022. We, hear me clearly, we still have an enormous amount of work to do. But what I can say is, we know research shows, like we've already talked about, our first line of defense when someone is experiencing suicidal ideation is not to lock them up on an inpatient psych unit, right? We know that that's not the answer. And that's the last thing that any of us wants, right? So yeah. And also something to know about the VA is, you know, we are doing a lot more with a variety of treatments. So like Kristy had mentioned, you know, whole health before, but we're also utilizing, you know, acupuncture and integrative psychiatry, and just knowing, you know, that obviously, which we've known for a long time, but, you know, we're really doing more with you know, the mind body connection, and have great partners in dealing with that. So it's not just your traditional, you know, old white dude, you know, in a sweater that you're just going to go and sit and talk to for an hour and then, oh, time's up, and you got out of there. I mean, there's so much more, you know, there's so much more help available.
I would like to share, I think, with folks that, you know, what both of you just said was totally echo that. I would love for people to know that the VA is so incredibly diverse, both in the programs that we offer, both in, you know, the providers that we have working there, that there are people from all walks of life with all different experiences, with, you know, varying political, religious beliefs, sexuality, like all those things. And we work so hard to make vets feel welcome and to make them have a safe space, whether that's through our women's clinic, whether that's, you know, with support for military sexual trauma. We, at our facility, we have a whole health clinic that's for folks that identify LGBT. I mean, I know before I came to the VA, I had a very kind of closed off view of like what a VA hospital was. And I just think that there's so much that we can offer veterans if we're given the chance.